So, I know this video is long overdue, but I am finally talking about the legendary clash of Whitebeard versus Blackbeard. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, I am currently going through One Piece. I'm slowly making my way through. I'm a little post-time skip now, but there is still so much I've seen that I haven't even covered yet. Such as the moment I'm going to talk about in this video, which is the fight between Whitebeard and Blackbeard. Now, here's the thing. At first, I was annoyed having to think back on this moment and all of the pain that was involved with it. But then something interesting happened, which is that the more and more I actually started to think through this moment, the crazier and crazier I realized it actually was. It almost kind of freaked me out a little. And the thing is, I don't even need to exaggerate. I just need to talk about what actually happened and the circumstances around it. I even realized some things I hadn't even thought of before. One of those things I definitely want to talk about is with Blackbeard. Because again, as much as I'm going to talk about the things he did that genuinely pissed me off, and to be clear, I hated this dude so much in this moment, but when I re-examined a lot of the stuff he did, there honestly was almost a funny aspect of what happened with him. Okay, now before you grab the pitchforks, I know how that sounds, and to be clear, I'm not saying that what he did was funny. I would never disrespect the GOAT himself, Whitebeard, by ever implying that what his snake of a former crewmate did to him in this moment was funny, because again, it pissed me off too. But rather, I want to lay out the circumstances to show almost the comedic aspect of how badly Blackbeard nearly fumbled this moment. And I think a lot of people actually forget just what happened. Heck, even the One Piece world seems to have selective amnesia, like they forget about what they actually saw in this moment. But I'm not gonna forget. Now, before I can even talk about Blackbeard arriving and the fight that happens, I've got to set up just the state that Whitebeard was in. Because again, saying this dude was in rough shape is a massive understatement. Like, just look at him. Now, I'm not exactly a medical expert, but I'm pretty sure that this is not how a healthy person looks. And also, the craziest part is, this is not a situation where it looks worse than it is. His appearance is actually better than the state he's in, which is definitely saying a lot because he looks horrible. Because let me remind you of everything Whitebeard is currently experiencing. Now, first of all, if you remember, he showed up at Marineford already dying of an illness. But in addition to being sick, this was also a guy who got stabbed by an ally, took a bunch of hits and got stabbed a lot, and also got shot up by a bunch of people. And arguably worst of all, this dude got into a fight with the walking equivalent of an active volcano. Like, if you look at Whitebeard here, most of the visible damage is by a Kainu. Like, this dude punched a few holes into him, and then something you can't even see here is that he badly burnt up his insides. Like, I'm looking at this dude like, how are you still alive? Now, he was even in rougher shape in the manga because a Kainu blew a chunk out of his head, but in the anime it was just a chunk of his mustache. I'll let you decide which is worse. Also, in addition to that, I can't forget about the fact that he had a legendary back and forth clash with the world's strongest swordsman. Okay, hold on. I'm getting word that that actually never happened, so my bad. Okay, you know what? I'm going to stop the Mihawk slander for this video, I promise. I'm just a disappointed fan. I'm like that kid who turns up at an NBA game and then my favorite player isn't even playing. But yes, in addition to everything Whitebeard was dealing with, his emotional and mental state here may even be worse than his physical one. Because again, he had to lead his family and allies into war. He would have seen many of them die, including and especially Ace. He also had to deal with Luffy's insanity, which can certainly do stuff to a person's mental state. And so he's dealing with all this. He's probably wondering like, okay, how can things get worse for me? And so the One Piece world answers, because again, Blackbeard just happens to turn up with his entire crew. Now, I don't know about you, but I was practically rolling my eyes when I saw this dude because I was like, have I not suffered enough? Like, after everything I've been put through with Marineford, now this dude turns up, who's certainly gonna make things worse. Now, of course, I immediately thought back to Impel Down when Blackbeard came across Luffy, and I realized he basically warned him he was gonna turn up at Marineford, because Blackbeard was like, yeah, I'm gonna put on a show that's gonna shake the world, and I was like, what does that mean? Because I just knew the moment he turned up, I was like, okay, he shows up after all the fighting has been going on. Like, he is insanely opportunistic or lucky or a bit of both. Because another way that Blackbeard got lucky is Whitebeard is completely separated from the rest of his crew. Like, his lucky timing and also plot armor might be his greatest ability. But I wanted to be clear before the fight actually begins, This is far from an honorable fight, since Whitebeard versus Blackbeard was about as honorable as a fight as Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson. Like, sure, in that fight, was that Mike Tyson in the ring? Technically, yes. In this fight, is that Whitebeard there? Also technically yes. But again, I mean, just like, look at the dude. So do you deserve full credit for fighting him in this state? Absolutely not. If anything, not only do you not deserve credit, but you should be publicly shamed.
Move this man!
Like, Blackbeard, do you have no shame? That is a dying old man. Like, even if you did nothing, he's about to die. But seriously, I think if you gave Whitebeard a choice of the faces he wants to see least right before he dies, Blackbeard's face might be the most annoying for him, because Blackbeard arguably is the person that betrayed Whitebeard the most in this world. After all, he was on Whitebeard's crew and he did the single worst thing you could do, which is kill another crew member. Then on top of that, he turned Ace into the authorities and kicked off everything that happened here. So all the pain and the suffering of Marineford can directly be linked back to Blackbeard. So Blackbeard showing up right before his death, that's like rubbing salt in a wound. And to make it worse, this dude Blackbeard is a rage baiter, because the first thing he says to Whitebeard is "Long time no see. I'm glad I could be here at your death." Also, he still has the gall to call Whitebeard Pops. Like, I don't know about you, but I was like, okay, I know how this is likely gonna go, but Whitebeard, please. If you could give me one last gift before you go to the afterlife, make sure that dude Blackbeard is sent there first. Okay, so now with the fight about to begin, I believe I've established just how much of an overwhelming advantage Blackbeard has in this position. But on top of that, he also has an information advantage because Whitebeard has never seen him use his devil fruit, so he doesn't know Blackbeard can take away his powers. Meanwhile, Blackbeard knows so much about Whitebeard, so Blackbeard has another advantage. And honestly, knowing all that and then watching how badly Blackbeard is about to nearly fumble everything is almost kind of funny. Like, let's actually look at what went down. Because again, honestly, going into this moment, I expected more of Blackbeard, because this dude shows up at Marineford at the most inopportune time for Whitebeard, and essentially Blackbeard is about to jump this old man, and so I'm watching this like, okay, Blackbeard, how are you gonna handle this? This is kind of a rat move, but hey, you got the grand stage you wanted. The world is watching. Even the Marines are like, hey, we're gonna let them fight. Nobody gets involved, okay? We know when a major moment is happening and we can just watch. And to be clear, everything at Marineford is still being broadcast around the world to everyone. But one of the major pet peeves I have with Blackbeard is not even that he's evil, but no, it's the way he starts out every fight totally unprepared. Like, to give a few examples, against Ace, he wasn't really taking things seriously. He was getting absolutely destroyed by Ace, and then he realized, like, okay, it's a fight, I gotta lock in, and he locked in and won. Or against Luffy and Impel Down, this dude instigates a fight, and then when a fight broke out, he was wildly unprepared for the fight. Now, he locked in and started beating Luffy back, and then that fight eventually stopped. Even in Impel Down, right after he fought Luffy, you'd think he would have learned his lesson and he was walking up to Magellan, and yet somehow he was completely unprepared for anything to happen. So Magellan just one-shot his entire crew. Again, I'm trying to establish there was a bit of a pattern, so even coming into this fight, I was kind of like, okay, Blackbeard, have you learned from your previous mistakes? Certainly he's ready for when Whitebeard throws the first punch, right? So imagine my surprise when the fight begins, because Whitebeard is just like, okay, I hate seeing this guy's stupid face, but again, this is also an opportunity to summon my remaining strength to absolutely beat this dude down. And so Whitebeard winds up his attack, and again, I love seeing Whitebeard use his devil fruit every single time. Like, this power with the world's strongest man just feels so right. And so Whitebeard sends his first attack, and this attack has to travel a lot of distance. It also destroys a bunch of Marines on the way, which I kind of feel bad for. But in the few seconds this attack takes to reach Blackbeard, I'm thinking like, okay, certainly he's learned from some of his previous mistakes, right? He also knows Whitebeard well, he'll know his attack patterns. And again, he's not going to show up to instigate a fight with Whitebeard and not be prepared for the first attack, right? But then I see Blackbeard panicking, and once again he's unprepared as this attack gets closer and closer, and he's like, who could have seen that coming? I know we were supposed to be fighting, but I was not prepared for this fight to start. Honestly, the fault is mine for expecting anything other than complete incompetence. Because again, Blackbeard time and time again has shown me he is never ready for the start of a fight. But no, I guess he was just like, I'm just gonna wing it. I don't even know what this guy thinks half the time, because again, half the time I'm like, okay, he's pretty smart. The other half of the time I'm like, he's a complete dope. But then Blackbeard gets up and I'm like, okay, he's going to turn this around, because again, one of the things I will give Blackbeard credit for is even though he doesn't begin fights well, once he actually locks in, he is a very good fighter. Now again, I've heard some accusations in the One Piece community about some off-screen behavior. I did see him beat Ace with an off-screen finishing move. Now again, it's possible he tried to off-screen this fight, but the move didn't work. Like, I don't know. Maybe Whitebeard's aura is just too much where he's like, no. You're not off-screening this fight. Everyone is about to see the pain I'm about to inflict on you. Well, imagine my surprise when the first thing this dude says, right after he gets up after getting hit by Whitebeard's attack, is he really has the goal to complain that Whitebeard is without mercy and how could you attack me? Really? Like, what exactly did you expect? Like, how can you be an instigator then play the victim when a fight breaks out? Now, Whitebeard is separated from the rest of his crew by a chasm. However, Marco could technically fly over and get to him if he wanted. But I gotta say, I like this moment from Whitebeard. Now, part of me does question if maybe he should have done otherwise, but it's certainly an honorable thing to do when he tells Marco to not get involved. He's like, no, this is my responsibility, okay? Because again, as the captain, he understands like, okay, I gotta settle the score for Blackbeard killing Thatch. Like, I gotta make this right. And look, Blackbeard, take some notes, okay? This is how an honorable person behaves, okay? But again, he's not going to, and he's about to do something that genuinely pisses me off in a moment. Also, something else I thought I would mention is that it does seem perfect that the three people of Blackbeard, Whitebeard, and Thatch would have their fates so interconnected with each other, because the name of the real Blackbeard was Edward Teach, or also sometimes spelled Edward Thatch. And it seems like Oda split up his name so that he gave Edward Newgate or Whitebeard one part of it, he gave Marshall D. Teach another part, and Thatch obviously got the last part. So it seems only fitting that the three of them would be so linked, and also that Blackbeard already killed Thatch and he was trying to currently kill Whitebeard, and he already stole Thatch's devil fruit and he wanted to get his hands on Whitebeard's. Almost like it was destiny to become the fulfilled version of Blackbeard or something like that. But then Blackbeard finally begins using his darkness power. And honestly, as much as Blackbeard pisses me off, he does have a really cool power. But Whitebeard's a little confused at first, like what exactly is going on. I can't blame him for that, but I still question why are you letting him wind up this attack? Because again, Blackbeard is sending out his darkness everywhere. And then Whitebeard starts to slowly sink into it, but he's not really doing anything to move. But I'm like, you really shouldn't have let up and you should have just been hitting this guy with attack after attack. But again, I get it. It wouldn't be fun if he just did that. But one of the most wild things about this fight is just how much Blackbeard is taunting Whitebeard. Because he says stuff like, you know, I used to look up to you and then you got old and you couldn't protect people from dying in your crew. And I'm like, wow, did he really just say that? Like, he did not just say that. At this point, if I didn't already want Whitebeard to absolutely destroy this guy, that only added even more desire to see it happen. But Whitebeard at this point is still at a massive disadvantage because he doesn't know how Blackbeard's power works. So of course, Whitebeard winds up an attack with his devil fruit, not knowing Blackbeard can take it away. And here's the thing, I don't want to give Blackbeard any credit, but during this portion of the fight, he definitely gives Whitebeard quite a beating. Because he grabs Whitebeard, stopping his attack, and he just starts beating this dude down. And these aren't like small shots, he lands some very good shots on Whitebeard. Like, some of these are brutal. Like, one of these hits sends Whitebeard off the ground, and again, Whitebeard is not a small dude. Now, because Blackbeard is Blackbeard, he has to make a stupid decision at one point, which is that for whatever idiotic reason, he tells Whitebeard how his power works, and that he's able to take away Whitebeard's devil fruit. Like, even me, someone who was rooting for Whitebeard, didn't understand why he told him that. And then Whitebeard is just like, hold on, I don't even need my powers to beat you. And in that moment, he's like, yeah, I'm at less than 1 HP. I don't care, I could still beat you. And I love that moment where Whitebeard counterattacks and you get to see the fear in Blackbeard in that moment, like, whoa. I could not have predicted this. And then Whitebeard slices Blackbeard, and it's actually kind of insane just how quickly this fight just turned. Because one moment Blackbeard was arrogantly taunting Whitebeard, and the next moment he's rolling on the ground in pain, looking like he's about to lose the fight. And I would like to imagine Blackbeard is thinking something like this. I was kind of banking on the fact that he would be a lot weaker in this moment, because again, like, that's freaking Whitebeard I'm fighting here. Like, cut me a break. I may have been relying a little too much on my surprise attack of being able to nullify his powers. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't really consider he might still be strong enough to beat me even without those. that was my bad. Also, if you're enjoying the video so far, remember to like and subscribe. But honestly, this portion of the fight was so satisfying to watch. Because again, the fact is, Blackbeard had the perfect opportunity set up. He basically would get credit with being the guy who finally defeated Whitebeard, the world's strongest man. Even if it wasn't a fair fight, even if Whitebeard was at less than 1 HP, you know how these things work with the details, people forget about them. So going into the fight, I was kind of irritated because I was like, this dude is really going to get credit with beating Whitebeard, and most people aren't going to know the circumstances. But then I was watching this wondering, how did Blackbeard fumble such a massive advantage this bad? Because Blackbeard at this point has basically pissed himself, maybe literally, I don't know, I don't really want to think about that. I know I would have, but again, I also wouldn't have shown up to fight Whitebeard because I'm not insane. Even if Whitebeard was fully dead, I would not go near that body, just, you know, as a precaution. But yes, Blackbeard is just like, I may have made a horrible mistake, and Whitebeard is walking up to this dude, and when he grabs his head, I'm like, oh shoot. Now, honestly, I wasn't expecting Whitebeard to grab Blackbeard's head, because again, the moment I realized, oh, he's going to use his power on him, I was honestly like, okay, there's no chance someone's going to step in, because again, this is the kind of thing that should kill Blackbeard, or at the very least, it should break his jaw, probably knock him out. So I'm thinking like, okay, if he uses this power, he's won the fight. Certainly, he's not going to be able to use this power. And you also got to see the fear of death put into Blackbeard because again, he started pleading. It actually got a little shameful because I'm like, okay, Blackbeard, like have some pride and a little bit of honor. But no, this dude is just like, I'm your son, you wouldn't do this to me, like come on, Pops. Really? I mean, this dude is saying that after everything he's done? So I'm just like, okay, Blackbeard, this was shameful. But I was honestly shocked when Whitebeard used his power because I was like, there's no way he survives that, right? Like, we've seen what this power can do. This is what he did moments ago to MARINEFORD. Now I get it, okay, he's not at full strength here because he's weakened, but still. It was even difficult to hear the sounds that Blackbeard made because again, these were not pleasant. I mean, I don't fully blame him, but at the same time, I'm gonna use it against him. Because again, you showed up to fight a dying old man, and then you started losing the fight despite every advantage. You deserve the slander. And then of course the smoke clears and you see Blackbeard is still alive and I'm like, how? Like I get it, okay, the dude has absurd plot armor. He is also durable, but he's not that durable. And I find it funny how somehow even the walking corpse of Whitebeard basically beat Blackbeard. Anything that happened after this moment is fraudulent. I barely even acknowledge what happened after this. I'm gonna discuss it, but I barely acknowledge it. But I do find it kind of funny thinking about what everyone else watching must be thinking, because they've got to be a little confused, like, hold on. This is the guy who really thought he could take over from Whitebeard? And yet he couldn't even beat him in this state? Like, he talked a big game about the new era and how he was going to take over and this and that, but you can't even beat a less than 1% Whitebeard? Like, this should have been a PR nightmare Blackbeard should have never been able to recover from. Like, as far as I'm concerned, his prospects of becoming an Emperor of the Sea should have been non-existent after this point. Like, the Marines or somebody at the press should have stepped in and been like, okay, I know he has a lot of the qualifications, but we saw what happened in that fight, right? Like, we all saw that. The dude basically soiled himself in front of Whitebeard. Like, Blackbeard really fumbled this moment. But again, I gotta discuss what happens next, because Blackbeard is a snake. Because here's the thing, even though Blackbeard got absolutely destroyed by Whitebeard, Whitebeard was already in extremely rough shape, and so at this point he was barely clinging to life. But again, I don't know how this man did it, but somehow he was able to summon the last of his remaining strength. And just look at this dude walking towards Blackbeard. Like, this man is absolutely terrifying and he is a force of nature. And I mentioned this before, but his ship is called the Moby Dick. And if anything, perfectly represents Whitebeard because much like in the story, the whale was almost this unconquerable force of nature. I think that also perfectly represents what Whitebeard is. After all, he is the white whale of the One Piece world. He is an unconquerable force of the sea. But this man is walking towards Blackbeard and it's clear he's gonna kill him. And Blackbeard is freaking out, he's basically crying, but the thing is, I don't even blame him for this. because I almost felt a little uneasy and I was just watching this. But again, Blackbeard goes with a bit of a rat move and he pulls out a gun and starts shooting him. Now, to be fair to Blackbeard, yes, using a gun is technically fair game, but what's not fair game is what he's about to do, because then he orders his crew to kill Whitebeard so they all jump him. And I swear, I was just so done with Blackbeard in this moment. Like, come on. Like, you couldn't even beat a severely weakened and dying Whitebeard in a 1v1? You really had to resort to getting your crew to jump him? Like, this dude Blackbeard really has no shame. I'm actually surprised the onlookers, and again, the entire world was watching this because it was being broadcast to the world. I'm surprised more of them didn't have bad reactions to Blackbeard and this performance he put on. Like, seriously, I wanted to see loads of slander all throughout the One Piece world. I don't care if it's in newspapers, in discussions, I don't even care. Do they have online forums? Do they have their own version of Twitter? I don't care. Whatever the medium is, I want to see the slander. Because if anything, he didn't show how great of a pirate he was, he really only showed just how legendary of a pirate Whitebeard was in comparison. And Blackbeard had to resort to jumping him with his entire crew, and again, it was definitely tough to watch all of them just shoot up Whitebeard. And even when Blackbeard joined in on shooting Whitebeard and all of a sudden he had that smug, satisfied grin on his face, I'm like, no. Your crew can have that look, but not you, okay? Not you. We saw what just happened. Anyone else here, but not you. Also, side note, it's not really relevant, but it was kind of funny the way Blackbeard's crew came flying in. Like, especially the horse, I don't know, something about this just looked kind of funny to me. But the rest of it was not funny, it was just depressing. And what's crazy is Whitebeard shows, even in a horrible moment like this, just how much of a legend he was, because look at the way he's taking all these hits. He's just accepted his fate, he's taken it quietly. So that was definitely impressive, which is definitely a huge contrast to the fact that Blackbeard basically soiled himself multiple times during their fight. But I was mostly just pissed off watching this. And the more and more you think about everything in this moment, the more depressing it becomes. Because again, the single most important thing to Whitebeard was family. And to see that it was a man he viewed as his son in Blackbeard who would do something so horrible to him, that just makes it so much worse to watch. But eventually they stop shooting Whitebeard and they're not entirely sure, is he dead, is he passed out? But it's wildly impressive that he's still standing up. Now Blackbeard looked like he was about to soil himself once again when Whitebeard started talking. Now I don't even blame him for freaking out, because if I was Blackbeard, I would genuinely start questioning, like, can anything kill this man? Now again, I can't prove this, but a part of me would like to believe that Whitebeard actually has to accept his death. That he's such a force of nature that you can't really kill him by conventional means. But he has to be at peace with his death. And the thing is, he had a couple more things to say, and he dropped some legendary lines. The first thing he said was to Blackbeard when he was like, "The man Roger was waiting on, it's not you, Teach." Whitebeard basically looked at him and was like, "You're not that guy, pal, trust me. You're not that guy." Now, to me, it seemed like Blackbeard was mostly just confused by this. But right now, I would assume Luffy was the guy Roger was waiting on, but I guess I'll see more on that later. But Whitebeard keeps monologuing, and he's dropping a lot of ominous information about future wars and different things like that. And look, I don't really want to dive too much into it because it could be a whole discussion, but to me, Whitebeard was basically like, oh yeah, Sengoku and everyone here, everything that happened at Marineford is going to seem like a walk in the park compared to the insanity that is in the near future. And honestly, knowing what I know about characters like Luffy, I'm like, yeah. Like, I don't even need Whitebeard to tell me that to be like, yeah, I mean, Luffy's involved. Obviously, things are only going to get more and more chaotic. But even so, part of me is just like, I don't know if I'm prepared for what's coming. But to be fair, I don't know if anyone is. But honestly, what I really appreciate about this whole monologue by Whitebeard is that it's a perfect passing of the torch from the old generation to the new. And then this man, with the entire world watching, decides to drop one of the most impactful lines in the history of the One Piece world. Because with his famous last words, he says, "The One Piece is real." And finally, after having to suffer through everything he experienced at Marineford, Whitebeard finally draws his last breath and he passes on. And honestly, what a life he lived. He truly was someone who deserved the title of the world's strongest man, but even more so than a strong man, he truly was a great one. He really was the white whale of One Piece. And what a great final moment by Whitebeard despite the bad circumstances. And you know it's a great moment when even Blackbeard is impressed. Because Blackbeard's like, whoa, Okay, those were some pretty great final words. Like, that's how you know you really cooked, when even one of your biggest haters is like, okay, that was impressive. This whole moment was definitely a roller coaster of emotions, but I can't deny Whitebeard certainly knew how to put on a great show, and he had such a legendary final moment. And I love that in Whitebeard's final moments, you got to see what his treasure was. And it wasn't wealth or fame, but it was his family. But the thing is, that also highlights the tragedy of this moment because Blackbeard was part of his family. Blackbeard had a family, he had people that cared about him and loved him. But for whatever reason, he decided that wasn't enough and he betrayed them. And that really adds to more of the tragedy of the moment, but also the beauty of it. Now, I also believe that Blackbeard deserves a lot of slander for the stuff that happened here. And I'm a little disappointed it seems like the One Piece world had selective amnesia with the stuff he did and didn't do here. But hey, I get it. He put on a grand performance after. I'm not going to get into that. But I understand when you put on a crazy show, people tend to forget what happened right before. But anyway, enough about that. What do you think about this? And also, if you want to see more of these videos, please like and subscribe. And thank you for watching.